Yes, the honourable member for St. James North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to intervene in this debate on resolution. Well, the main part of it is to accept the Barbados Green Economy Scoping Study. I have to support what my colleague, the honourable member for St. George South, said on the first day of this debate last week, when he said, though, that this study, as important as it is, really and truly has taken over 2 years to come before Parliament, having been formally completed on the 5th of June 2014. And really and truly, if the environment and the management of it is as of prime importance as the government has made it out to be, this has taken too long to come here to this Parliament for debate and for reference then to the public libraries of Barbados and hopefully for the reference of the wider community. One of the significant points as you open the study, Mr. Speaker, it is revealed that, in fact, 2 of the Barbados Labour Party candidates in the next election, Mr. Ryan Strachan and Mr. Colin Jordan, were prime stakeholders and have been congratulated for their enthusiastic participation in the stakeholder consultation process. And that really emphasizes the quality of the team of young candidates, new candidates who have come into play for the Barbados Labour Party in our now completed lineup for the next general election, whenever it is called. But as the Honourable Minister of the Environment who led this debate last week pointed out, both parties have had a place in whatever area of development we have reached as a country in terms of the green economy. I mean, the Barbados Labour Party in 2007, in fact, developed the first national green economy policy in the Caribbean and one of the first in the world. And then Minister of the Environment, Ms. Elizabeth Thompson, who went on, of course, to become an Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations, received a global award from the United Nations for her role in advancing the environment and the green economy in Barbados. There's clearly, sir, a link between the creation of green jobs and employment, and of course in a day and age where the economy and society of Barbados is under stress, as it has been for all the 8.5 years of this Democratic Labour Party governance. This is very important, and we as lawmakers and policymakers in this country really have a duty to our electorate to advance the link between the creation of green jobs and the economy, and to lower our employment rate. And we certainly agree that we have to encourage this, and one way of encouraging it, sir, would be for the Ministry of Education to give more special development scholarships in this area. What we found is the year before the last general elections, 2012, I believe there were as many as 21 or 22 national development scholarships that were given out. My colleague, the Honourable Member for St. Thomas, in fact tells me I'm being generous to the government, that there were in fact 23 national development scholarships given out the year before the last general elections. But suddenly and mysteriously and inexplicably, the year following the elections, there were only 6 or 7. But certainly this is an area where I would think the Ministry of Education, led by the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central, ought to be increasing the number of special development scholarships and national development scholarships in these areas of national development for Barbadians. And And clearly the economy and energy enhancement and water resource management is one of those, or rather are some of those areas that need advancing and encouragement of our young people to go into these areas for the benefit of the development of our country and beautiful nation state over the next 50 years. Again, we cannot let this debate conclude, Mr. Speaker, and I believe, in fact, my colleague, the Honourable Member for St. Michael's South East, referred to it in her speech just before lunch, but it was the Barbados Labour Party administration. I thought, in fact, it was the Tom Adams administration that first did it. She felt it was the last, but it, in fact, began, to my recollection, under the Tom Adams administration, incentivizing the creation of a new industry and area of the economy of Barbados, the solar water heating energy industry, by providing tax incentives for persons to install solar water heaters on their homes. If I recall, $3,500 was given as a tax allowance for installation, up to $3,500 for installation of solar water heaters under the Tom Adams regime. And this is the kind of thinking and vision that Barbados Labour Party governments always bring to the table. As opposed to that by the Democratic Labour Party government, the last two administrations of which have both removed the vast majority of tax incentives which would help grow the economy rather than continue its reduction as been happening under the LP rule within recent times. We have to be concerned, Mr. Speaker, my colleague, the Honourable Member for St. Thomas, spoke earlier about the decline. And in fact, as the Honourable Member for St. Michael West Central spoke in his speech earlier today about the decline in agriculture over the years under the Democratic Labour Party administration. You know, I don't want to go back to the excellence of the Right Honourable.
Yes, I remember, Hussein.
Sorry, Speaker, sir, the honourable members Mr. in the House. I certainly did not speak about the decline. I did not, at no point in time in the statement I made this morning did I talk about, or did I say that the agricultural sector declined under the Democratic Labour Party. I did not. So I just would really like the member to be clear. I did not say that, sir.
That is noted. The point of that, I'm sure the other member will be guided accordingly.
Mr. Speaker, my interpretation of what the Honourable Member said was that he agreed that there was a decline. I mean, he might not have said that in so many words, but...
May get use of your time, Honourable Member, please.
I don't want to toil on the excellence of our national hero, the Right Excellence Errol Barra, because I know that the Democratic Labour Party would say that his No Cane Blade speech was misinterpreted and taken out of context. But we have a situation now, of course, where I don't even know if we have been given the figure of the amount of tons that were reaped in sugarcane in Barbados this year. I certainly might have missed it, but I haven't heard a figure whether it was 7,000, 6,000, 8,000. But certainly we've had a tremendous decline in all aspects of agriculture, including the sugarcane industry under the Democratic Labour Party government over the last 8.5 years. And this really and truly is contrary to, as the Honourable Member for St. Thomas pointed out, to the rhetoric delivered in the Democratic Labour Party manifestos of both 2008 and 2013. The 2008 manifesto at page 42, of course, promising the creation of a new land use policy. And, you know, American style, in the first 100 days, we would lay an Agricultural Protection Act, which would require 2/3 majority. And the amazing thing, Mr. Speaker, is that the Democratic Labour Party government had 2/3 majority on coming into office in 2008, and could easily have passed that Agricultural Protection Act as promised in their 2008 manifesto within the first 100 days of its administration. 30,000 acres were to be reserved for agricultural use. I know certainly that is not the case as we speak. There was also to be, under that manifesto, on the basis of which the Democratic Labour Party was elected, there was to be a change of zoning of land. Any change of zoning of land was to be approved by this Parliament of Barbados, but that has not been the case either. And you know, this would have been, of course, without doubt, the input of the Honourable Member for St. Lucie, that at page 42 of the manifesto, amendments to the Land Acquisition Act were to, at least the Land Acquisition Act was to be amended to require government to pay compensation on the replacement value of the land rather than the market value of the properties being acquired. But that is not the case. I mean, that is right out of the book of the Honourable Member for St. Lucie. I don't think he would mind me giving him credit for that. He speaks about that regularly on the floor of this Parliament. He obviously has not been able, however, to make any impression whatsoever on his fellow cabinet colleagues in that respect, needless to say in other respects either. But we have a situation where instead, as previously, sir, and I will not be insincere to say otherwise, people whose land have been acquired continue to be deprived of compensation, monetary compensation for years and sometimes decades, in breach of all rules of natural justice, both nationally and internationally. So these are the areas, Mr. Speaker, that the Democratic Labour Party has really and truly, as usual, brought rhetoric to the table rather than action, and followed through on its promised word and spoken word, both spoken and written, as outlined in its manifesto and on the political platforms in its successful attempt to gain the government of Barbados in 2008. Again, in the 2012 manifesto, the last manifesto of the Democratic Labour Party government, again a document of the House, which the DLP administration will expand the water supply in the south and east of the island. My geography, sir, tells me that the east of the island is St. Joseph and St. Andrew, St. John even, and they've been without water on a daily basis, many parts of those three parishes, for the last 18 months. So again, you know, sir, my whole point is that we have a resolution before Parliament which sounds good in terms of words and rhetoric, but, you know, that doesn't really bring any joy to any of the people we represent at the constituency level. That these words have to be put in action and in real meaning. And that is what I would like to see the Cabinet of Barbados led as mandated by the Honourable Minister of the Environment to really bring into action, so that this means makes a real difference in terms of our constituents. In my case, persons in Sion Hill, in Ashton, in Trents. And if I am to talk about Trents, again, the Democratic Labour Party, in its book entitled The LP Performance 2008-2012, speaks about that there was a launch of 2 flood relief projects in 2009, one of which was the whole town flood mitigation project in St. James. Now, sir, I mean, I don't know who's the author of this document, which of course is documented by the House as well. But when I drove through Trent, which is part of Whole Town, on Sunday night at about 9 o'clock, on my way home from the Barbados Labour Party conference, I was a bit petrified and apprehensive driving my SUV, very good vehicle, sir, SUV, Fortuner through Trent, in case it got stuck up in one of the 4 lakes that were there. because of the rainfall that day. So I really don't know what we're talking about in terms of relief project in whole town. These are the issues that I speak to when I speak to making a real difference in terms of the lives of the people of Barbados. Because someone living in Trent, and I stopped at a lady who had a birthday over the weekend and spoke to her, and she could not get out her house in ordinary shoes, would have to wear boots to go out. And that is whole town. So we're talking, sir, about translating the words of this resolution into something positive, because that is what we are here for. We aren't here for pretty words and language and Latin phrases and quotes from the Bible, as sound as they are, but we have to make a difference positively in the lives of our people on a daily basis. And this is my tremendous concern, sir. We have a situation where we need more green spaces in this country. I mean, what is the government's policy on that? Creation of green spaces, which would be environmentally sound if we talk about environmental soundness. I mean, some of us have had the privilege on both sides of this parliament to go to Singapore, and I mean, we see the green spaces on a landmass, not that much bigger than Barbados, but yet 5 million people, many more people in Barbados, and green spaces all about Singapore. We don't have that in Barbados. Where is the policy on creation of green spaces in this country? I agree, even though he may not want me to credit him with it, based on his intervention earlier with the honourable member for St. Michael, West Central, who spoke about agriculture needed for the enhancement of the aesthetics in Barbados and for the rainfall. We know that. You don't have to be a scientist to know that. But yet, as I said, we have not seen an agricultural policy to increase the agriculture in Barbados after the honourable minister mandated with the responsibility for agriculture, I believe, said in this parliament that he was going to plough up Barbados from north to south, from east to west, and even plough up the right honourable member for St. Peter if he got in the way. We have not seen that in real action, sir. We speak about we instead hear excuses from that honourable minister about he can't bring down rain, and that's the reason why we not getting water. He can't bring down rain. But as the honourable member for St. Michael, West Central said, I mean, agriculture, trees, all of that help with the rainfall. So, you know, where is the government's guidance at the policy level on these issues? The people of Barbados gave the Democratic Labour Party the mandate to govern Barbados for 5 years, yes, and they have to take responsibility. It can't be a situation where 4, 5, 6 ministers say, don't blame me, that ain't me. I ain't taking responsibility for that. We are big men and big women, given tremendous responsibility for 270,000 people in this country. Let us accept the responsibility and get things done, and not only deal with words and resolutions and flying about the world to these big environmental conferences and taking the photo opportunity pictures and making our big speeches. We need that, but we need real difference among the people of Barbados as well. Speaker, again, the water issue, tied up with the environment, and the study speaks about water, is of serious concern. It has to be. It has to be a serious concern, where almost 1/5 of the people of Barbados tomorrow morning waking up don't know when to turn on the taps of water, whether it's going to be flowing or not. We have a situation where Ellerton Primary School had to close yesterday, no water. Dighton Griffith School, secondary school today closed early, no water. I mean, what's happening with us? You mean we after 50 years of political independence can't even bring water to school now? The water tanks now, we don't even have management that could ensure that if the water stops, that at least the water can flow through the water tanks at the school. I mean, we have to take responsibility in my constituency, sir, in James North. I mean, we are starting to have a water problem in terms of distribution. I mean, for the last 3 weekends, a bit, and to blame that on some breakdown of a pump at Molyneux or something. I don't know if the part came in yet. What we haven't done is brown water, dirty water, for the last year and a half, rusty water, unhealthy water. We have to take a handle on this. We can't continue to say that the problem too big or that it was there a long time before. This is the Democratic Labour Party is an administration that has now been in office for 8.5 years. That is long enough time to fix problems that encounter the ordinary citizens of this country. This resolution, of course, Mr. Speaker, also speaks to the issue of the National Conservation Commission, which of course was or is one of the primary agencies of government in terms of environmental enhancement of Barbados. And how the National Conservation Commission has been treated by this government, sir, is really something which has been shameful and which, if you didn't laugh, you would cry, sir. From a situation where 200 workers were dismissed unceremoniously and without just cause, and where the Right Honourable Prime Minister, by his public statements made in May 2013, clearly from his legal background, understood that they were being unfair and unceremoniously dismissed without just cause, and that they were wrongfully dismissed and unfairly dismissed. But yet we had reference of that matter to an employment rights tribunal that had been passed by both houses of parliament, but could not be found anywhere in real terms or practical terms in any part of Barbados. It had not been established. So the workers were carried through a whole set of mental turmoil for 2.5 years. Two and a half years?
Yes, Honourable Prime Minister.
Interrupt the honourable member as he oscillates between dotage and anecdotage. But he's misleading the House. The reference of that NCC matter to the Employment Rights Tribunal was at the written request of the trade unions with whom I met at government headquarters on that now famous Sunday. It was at the written request of the trade unions. It was not the Prime Minister referring anything to anything. The trade unions said that it would put them in a very invidious position if they had to decide which of their members should work and who should not work, and therefore the best persons to decide that would be a tribunal. And that request was made in writing by the trade unions.
Thanks for the elucidation. Honourable Member, please continue.
Mr. Speaker, while I have no doubt to believe my learned friend of many, many years, and I was not at the meeting, but certainly the trade unionists had reported by the press said that the matter had been referred to them, didn't say anything about any written request, and that in fact the matter would be decided in 5 days. That was what was the report given, that by the end of the week the matter would have been decided. But the 5 days turned out to be 2.5 years, sir. And then when all said and done, the decision given was known. I mean, it could have been decided on the same day, that infamous last day of May 2014, as the Prime Minister referred it to.
Honourable Member, you have 5 minutes in which to conclude.
Yes, sir. But whatever, whether we agree whether a letter was written or not, and that letter, sir, really and truly, if that is so, ought to be made a document of the House. It cost the Barbados taxpayers, hard pressed as they are with 35 additional new taxes or increase in taxes since the Democratic Labour Party came into office in 2008, it cost the Barbados taxpayers over $3 million of our hard-earned money that would have had to be paid, and the taxpayers can't get back the income tax returns from 2 years ago, can't get any increase in salary now, public servants for 7 years plus under the Democratic Labour Party government. But the issue, Mr. Speaker, is that there's case law precedent coming out of the highest court of appeal of this country, this nation state of Barbados, the Caribbean Court of Justice, that where a minister of government abuses his authority, that he should be financially bound to repay the taxpayers the money. And therefore the question arises whether the Honourable Minister of the Environment, having made the decision, because it was reported that the list of who will go home and who won't go home was in the Honourable Member for Christchurch East's hands. And therefore the question arises as to whether there was an abuse of authority as defined by the Caribbean Court of Justice in a case arising out of Belize, such that the Honourable Minister of the Environment should be liable financially to the people of Barbados to the tune of $3 million. Because the Cabinet of Barbados, as announced by the minister responsible, had decided first, last in, first out policy. But yet we found that employees of 10, 15, 20 years were sent home from the National Conservation Commission to the detriment of the taxpayers of Barbados, who now had to find $3 million in an era of severe economic recession to pay to these workers. But that is Democratic Labour Party governance. The resolution speaks towards characterized by good governance. This Democratic Labour Party administration's rule has been anything other than characteristic of good governance, Mr. Speaker. Their commitment to good governance has just been rhetorical. There's been a tremendous lack of transparency and accountability in this Democratic Labour Party administration, whether it has to deal with Cahill or whether it has to deal with how much you're paying these private haulers now to collect garbage. I mean, the $411, what it is per load or whatever, had to come from one of the private haulers rather than from any government minister, as they ought to have done. Total lack of good governance by this Democratic Labour Party administration. But we understand, as the public does, Mr. Speaker, that this characterized by good governance in this Clause 5 is just really and truly pure rhetoric because it sounds good. I agree, though, Mr. Speaker, with the Right Honourable Prime Minister, and in consonance with Clause 4, that we need to remind Barbadians of the importance of continuing to be good stewards of our country's natural environment. And I'm at all fours with the Right Honourable Prime Minister on this in a speech in which he delivered earlier in this session of Parliament. I would have loved to have been able, like him, to have somebody on many occasions who horn down people that I see in front of me throwing garbage out of a minibus or vehicle onto the street. You know, and these are Barbadians who call themselves patriotic.
Honourable Member, please wind up. Your time has
expired. Yes, sir, I will do that. And we really have to come together as one on this issue and try and educate Barbadians. That's not the done thing. That in some countries, in fact, that's a prison sentence. But we have people who think nothing of doing this, of doing this. But Mr. Speaker, this is the area where, you know, we would like to see action on an enhancement of policy, of environmental policy and creation of jobs for Barbadians in the green economy. to help sustain the development of this country, both for our nationals and residents, Barbadian citizens, and also in terms of our tourism development. I'm obliged, Mr. Speaker.